In 2011, New Tricks was the most watched programme on British television, not the most watched drama. The most watched programme, full stop, beating everything else broadcast in the United Kingdom that week on any channel in any genre. 4 years later, the BBC cancelled it, and by the time the final episode aired, not one of the 4 actors who had made it a hit was still in the cast. Not one of them. But the story of how that happened is stranger than anything the squad ever investigated. A leading man who became a national punchline on another BBC programme and then walked out on stage to confront the man impersonating him in front of a live audience. 2 members of the cast who were married to each other in real life, playing husband and wife to 2 entirely different people. 3 of the 4 stars publicly attacking their own writers in a magazine interview, and one of those writers firing straight back at them in public within days. An episode that was scheduled, billed, and then pulled off the air at the last minute because real events had overtaken the plot. And a single pair of viewing figures, 1 year apart, that explains exactly why the BBC pulled the plug. Stay with us, because the real story of New Tricks is a story about what happens when you replace people who cannot be replaced. Fact 1. It began as one-off. New Tricks was never meant to be a series. On the 27th of March 2003, BBC One broadcast a single 90-minute drama. The setup was simple. A detective superintendent whose career has gone badly wrong is handed a dead-end posting. Take 3 retired policemen, put them in an office, and let them reopen the cases nobody else wants. It was designed as a one-off. There was no series order, no returning cast, no plan beyond that one evening. The audience decided otherwise. The figures were strong enough that the BBC came back and commissioned 6 episodes, and Series 1 began on the 1st of April 2004, a full year after the pilot had aired. From there it ran for 12 series and 107 episodes, staying on air for 12.5 years. It outlasted most of the dramas commissioned alongside it, and a fair number of the executives who commissioned them. Not bad for a programme originally built to be forgotten by the following Friday. Fact 2. A real detective created it. The man behind New Tricks knew exactly what an unsolved case looked like because he had worked them himself. Nigel McCreary served with the murder squad in Nottinghamshire before he wrote a single line of television. He was first on the scene at Real Killings, including one of the most notorious murder cases the county has ever seen. He left the police, joined the BBC on a graduate scheme in 1990, worked as a researcher on the acclaimed drama Our Friends in the North, and then began turning what he had seen into scripts. His first great success was Silent Witness in 1996, built around a forensic pathologist and inspired in part by a real pathologist he had known. It is still running today, nearly 3 decades and 28 series later. New Tricks was his second. He created it with the writer Roy Mitchell. He also made the police drama Backup, and with the future Broadchurch writer Chris Chibnall, the 1950s medical series Born and Bred. McCreary died in February 2025, aged 71, having been diagnosed with a terminal illness the previous autumn. The BBC's director of drama said she was deeply saddened and called his gift for building characters unmistakable. The man who spent 30 years writing about unsolved deaths had once been the policeman standing over real ones. Fact 3. Waterman sang the theme. That voice over the opening titles belongs to the man on the screen. The New Tricks theme, It's Alright, It's Okay, was composed by Mike Moran and sung by Dennis Waterman, who played Jerry Standing. The closing titles carry a reprise of the same song. It was not the first time, and that is rather the point. Waterman had already sung the title music to Minder, one of the biggest ITV series of the 1980s, in which he played the Minder Terry McCann opposite George Cole's Arthur Daly. He sang the theme to the comedy On the Up. He sang the theme to Stay Lucky. Waterman was a singer as well as an actor, with a recording career running alongside the television work, and by the time New Tricks arrived in 2003, the habit had become something closer to a signature. Producers knew what they were getting when they hired him. So, by then, did the audience. Most actors hope the viewer will remember their face. Waterman arranged things so that you heard him before you ever saw him. Fact 4. Little Britain mocked him mercilessly. That signature turned him into a national joke, and it was merciless. On Little Britain, David Walliams played a miniature version of Dennis Waterman visiting his agent, played by Matt Lucas. The joke was always the same. He is offered a serious part, he is delighted. And then, he asks whether he will be allowed to, in the sketch's deliberately mangled pronunciation, write the theme tune and sing the theme tune. When the answer is no, he turns the job down and leaves. It ran and ran, across radio and then television. And for an entire generation of younger viewers, it became the very first thing they ever knew about him. Not the Sweeney, not Minder. A sketch about a tiny man demanding to sing. Waterman was baffled by it at first, and then irritated. What he did next was braver than ignoring it. He turned up in person, walked out alongside the caricature of himself in front of a live audience, and objected to his own impersonation, pointing out that he was not miniature and that he did not, in fact, write and sing the theme to everything he had ever appeared in. The man being laughed at took the microphone and joined in. Fact 5. Bolam's real wife appeared. One of the show's strangest details was hiding in plain sight, in the supporting cast, for years. Esther Lane, the patient, long-suffering wife of Alun Armstrong's character Brian, was played by the actress Susan Jameson. She was a familiar face on British television in her own right, and she recurred throughout the run as one of the very few stable presences in Brian's chaotic and obsessive life. Susan Jameson was also, in real life, married to James Bolam, who was standing a few feet away, in the same office, playing Jack Halford. So, for series after series, viewers watched a woman play the devoted wife of one member of UCOS while being married off-screen to another member of UCOS. The two of them would have driven to the same set from the same house, and then spent the working day pretending to be near strangers. 2 of the 4 leads were connected by a marriage the audience never saw, and the program never once acknowledged it. If you are enjoying this, subscribe, there is plenty more where this came from. Fact 6. It beat everything on television. The numbers New Tricks was pulling are the kind that barely exist anymore. The first series opened in 2004 to around 6.9 million viewers, which made it a solid performer in the 9 o'clock slot. By the 5th series, in 2008, it was averaging over 8 million an episode and peaking well above 9. And then came Series 8, in 2011, which is where it topped out entirely. The episode Lost in Translation drew 9.7 million viewers and became the most watched television program in Britain that week. Later in the same run, The Gentleman Vanishes went further still, 9.87 million, and topped the weekly chart all over again. Read that carefully, because it is easy to skim past. Not the most watched drama, not the most watched program on BBC One. The most watched program on British television, of any kind, on any channel, beating the soaps and the talent shows that normally own those positions without a fight. Critics spent a decade wondering aloud why a gentle show about 4 pensioners in a shabby office was so enormously popular. 9.8 million people did not appear to share the confusion. Fact 7. Bolam said it went stale. The first crack in the lineup came from inside, and it came at the very peak of the show's success. James Bolam had played Jack Halford from the very first episode, the quiet one, the widower, the moral centre of the squad. He was already a giant of British television long before UCOS existed, having made his name as Terry Collier in The Likely Lads back in the 1960s, and again in its 1970s sequel. He was appointed MBE for services to drama in 2009. At the time he left New Tricks, he was also appearing, rather wonderfully, in the children's series Grandpa in My Pocket. He told the producers during filming that he was going, and his stated reason was blunt. He felt the show had become stale. The executive producer said publicly that they were very sorry to see him go, and pointed to how much time and commitment a full series demanded of an actor. Bolam made his final regular appearance in the opening episode of Series 9, and then came back once as a guest in Series 10. The man who left because the show had stopped surprising him returned exactly once, and never again after that. Fact 8. The stars attacked their writers. In 2012, 3 of the 4 leads did something almost unheard of on a hit program. They criticized it in print while it was still on the air and still winning its slot. Speaking to the Radio Times, Waterman, Redman and Armstrong argued that the writing had grown too cautious. Waterman's complaint was the sharpest of the 3, that viewers are not as stupid as writers assume they are, and that this was simply the direction the whole industry was heading in. Coming from the lead actor of the BBC's top-rated drama, about the BBC's top-rated drama, it was an extraordinary thing to put on the record. The response was immediate. Julian Simpson, a writer and director, with an episode airing that very week, went onto Twitter and stated in unmistakable and thoroughly unprintable language precisely how much of his script the actors had contributed. His answer was, "Not one comma of it." For a few days, the most watched drama on British television was having a public argument with itself, in front of everybody. 3 stars doubting their own show in a national magazine, and 1 writer who flatly refused to take it quietly. Fact 9. 2 more left at once. If Bolam's exit was a crack, what followed was a collapse. Alun Armstrong and Amanda Redman both told the producers they were leaving. Armstrong had played Brian Lane, the obsessive, teetotal, rule-bound former detective whose extraordinary memory for detail drove half the plots in the series. Redman had played Sandra Pullman, the boss, the only serving police officer on a squad of retired ones, and the character the entire format had been constructed around from the pilot onwards. Redman was careful about how she framed it publicly. She said she loved new tricks, that she had loved playing Sandra, and that she had been given genuinely strong material to work with. But she felt she had reached the point where she had to go and try something new. Alun Armstrong was replaced by Nicholas Lyndhurst. Amanda Redman was replaced by Tamsin Outhwaite, the former EastEnders star, who came in as DCI Sasha Miller. Within roughly 2 years, a program built entirely on the chemistry between 4 specific people had lost 3 of them. Fact 10. The ratings told the truth. Here is the pair of numbers that decided the show's future, and they are brutal. Series 10, the last one, with most of the original lineup still in place, averaged 8.35 million viewers per episode. Series 11, the first without Redman and Armstrong, averaged 5.75 million. That is a loss of around 2.5 million people in the space of a single year. Roughly 30% of the audience gone. Same format, same squad. Same premise, the same office, the same slot, the same channel, the same kind of cases. The only thing that had genuinely changed was who was standing in the room. It is worth putting that next to a show that did the opposite. Death in Paradise has replaced its lead detective 5 separate times, and the audience has stayed loyal through every single one. Because on that show, the format itself is the attraction, and the detective is almost incidental to it. New Tricks replaced 3 of its 4 at once. And it turned out that on this show, the people were the format. Fact 11. Rodney Trotter joined UCOS. The replacements were not unknowns. If anything, the opposite. Nicholas Lyndhurst joined as Dan Griffin, a retired detective chief inspector with a background in the murder squad and in diplomatic protection. To virtually every household in Britain, Lyndhurst was Rodney Trotter from Only Fools and Horses, one of the most recognisable comic performances in the entire history of British television. He said he had long admired the mixture of charm, wit and intelligence the show brought its audience, and he described it as the BBC's top drama series. He was, by his own account, flattered to be asked. Inside the story, the writers handled the handover with some care. Griffin arrives on Brian Lane's personal recommendation, one departing character vouching for his own replacement, which is about as graceful an exit as television ever manages. Griffin himself was written as reserved and slightly aloof, a man whose manner irritates the team before his ability wins them round, with a genuinely bleak private life running underneath it, a wife in a secure hospital unit, and a disabled teenage daughter he adores. Britain's most famous younger brother turned up as a senior murder detective, and the show did not blink. Fact 12. A Star Wars pilot arrived. The other new arrival came with an even stranger entry on his CV. Dennis Lawson joined during Series 9 as Steve McAndrew, a retired detective from Glasgow who first appears to help with a case connected to his own past and then simply never leaves. The writers gave him an easy way in. Jerry Standing takes him out drinking, discovers over the course of a very long evening that they are fundamentally the same sort of copper, and the audience is invited to accept him on Jerry's say-so. Lawson had been a familiar face on British television for decades, with something close to 100 acting credits behind him. But to a large part of the world, he is Wedge Antilles, the rebel pilot from the original Star Wars trilogy, one of the very few characters to survive all three films, and a role he returned to decades later. He was also, by that point, following an impossible act. Replacing James Bolam was never going to be a comfortable job for anybody, and Lawson's first episodes lean into exactly that. He is written as the new man, and the team treats him like one. A squad of retired London policemen had quietly acquired the only man on television who had flown against 2 Death Stars. Fact 13. The BBC pulled an episode. In October 2012, an episode of New Tricks was scheduled, billed in the listings, and then removed from the schedule days before it was due to be broadcast. The episode concerned an underage sex ring at a care home, a case spanning 2 decades, exactly the kind of buried historical crime the series existed to dramatize. It was set to go out at 9 o'clock on a Monday evening. That same month, allegations about Jimmy Savile were dominating the news and engulfing the BBC itself, with the corporation facing extremely serious questions about what it had known and when it had known it. The BBC pulled the episode and broadcast the following weeks instead. The official statement was 1 line long. In light of current news events, the billed episode would be replaced. A drama built entirely on the idea that old crimes eventually catch up with people was taken off the air because, that month, old crimes were catching up with the people broadcasting it. Fact 14. Waterman refused to continue. By 2014, Dennis Waterman was the last man standing, the only actor to have appeared in every single series since the pilot. In September of that year, his agent confirmed he was leaving. The reason given was not money, and it was not a falling out. His agent was explicit that there had been no row with anybody. It was simply that Waterman missed the old crew, and that working on the show with an almost entirely new cast around him was not the same thing at all. He agreed to appear in only the first 2 episodes of Series 12. Larry Lamb took over for the rest of the run as Ted Case, a former head of the Metropolitan Police's Gun Crime Command, introduced when Jerry goes to him for evidence in his final story. Waterman later explained it in terms of music rather than television. "Great shows," he said. "Work like rock and roll bands. Change the lineup and you do so entirely at your own risk." He was careful to say this was no slight on the actors who had replaced his colleagues. It was that everything had changed dramatically and all at once, the moment Amanda and Alan walked out of the door. The last original member of UCOS left for precisely the same reason 2.5 million viewers had. Fact 15. Nobody original was left. On the 6th of October, 2015, after 107 episodes, New Tricks ended. The BBC's announcement earlier that year offered no scandal and no ratings crisis as the reason. The controller of BBC One said it was important to make room for new series and to keep widening the range of drama on the channel, and thanked the show's creator by name. The team on screen in that final run was Dennis Lawson, Nicholas Lyndhurst, Tamsin Outhwaite, and Larry Lamb. 4 experienced, capable, well-liked actors, and not one of them had been in the room when it started. The show had spent 12 years proving that a good format can survive almost anything. A lead walking out, a public row with its own writers, an episode pulled off the air days before broadcast, a complete change of production company. Then it spent its final 2 years proving that no format survives, losing everybody at once. Dennis Waterman died in May 2022 in Spain at the age of 74. He had appeared in every episode of all 12 series, the only person who could say that. He had already given British television George Carter in The Sweeney and Terry McCann in Minder, before Jerry Standing ever walked into that office. And the last theme tune he ever sang was this one.